Hello everybody, welcome to this video. I'm going to be discussing basically I'm going to be talking about how I am at the edge, not at the edge of like a cliff or something like that, but at the edge of my evolution or my development, you can say, my personal growth, my professional growth. Um, so recently I wrote this book, very short book, 10 chapters, and each chapter is like 3 pages on practical application, which basically talks about implicit learning or implicit knowledge, how to learn by being exposed, kind of like how you learn a language. You immerse yourself in the country, in the language, in different contexts. So the same thing, you do it, or the same thing, or this same action, you will take it or you will do it when you are trying to learn how to do anything, how to make changes, how to improve. For example, in my case, how to be a better teacher. So you look at all of these different stimuli, and you just, from videos, you journal, you talk to people, you practice it, you simulate it, you improvise, you practice it, you also study it, you read it, right? And basically that's the idea here. In practice, or in my day-to-day, I was working with kids. I still don't know if I'm going to continue working with kids, because all of that depends on politics, schedules, even money, stuff, and what benefits me, what benefits the different schools, things like that. But basically this past semester, which was from January more or less to July 2025, I was working with all ages. I was working with elementary, middle school, high school, and university students, and even some adults now, where I'm teaching some private classes in the afternoon. But basically, I wrote the book while I was in this experience, especially with kids, and these kids are highly gifted kids, high IQ kids, but also they have emotional problems. So, like all of this led me to basically want to be and learn and want to be like a better teacher, right? Um, Ironically, it made me want to be like a better university teacher. And in university, I teach English, but in university, I've been teaching other types of subjects in Spanish that have to do with education and psychology. So, and it's interesting because at the school, we're working with highly gifted kids. So you have some teachers, you have some psychologists, and it's basically where where education and psychology meet, making educational psychology, right? And I had never thought about that, but there's like a big relationship between psychology and education, because I had always been more oriented towards psychology, but I feel like the clinical part of it, like the therapeutical part of it, is exhausting. It's very long. You have to be very, very patient. And I think I think psychologists and educators, or psychologists, therapists, and teachers are both educators. They're both teachers to a certain extent, but psychologists do so more in implicit terms, right? Like indirectly, leading you to discover on your own. That's why it takes longer. And educators, teachers, they're more explicit with the knowledge, right? More direct, more conceptual, right? Academic. So yeah, I feel like I am more academic, or at least I like to work in schools, right? And not like in my office, having therapy with patients or whatever. Um, so practical application was written um, to basically kind of as a self-help book, self-improvement, personal development. I mean, you can basically choose whatever you want and learn it, acquire the knowledge, the skill sets, the practice, the experience, right? But all of this, ultimately, it's very interesting how one thing leads to another. And I was hearing this guy talk on high performance, and he was basically stating how an idea is like a baby, right? And when people insult it, it's like insulting a baby. But um, an idea is like a baby in terms that it's young, but it grows, it matures, it evolves, right? I like to use that word a lot. Like it evolves, and then eventually it gets good, right? You get to have like a very well formed, mature idea. That's the intention. So, for me, it's interesting just to see qualitatively what comes after one thing in my life, right? And in this case, after the book, I started to get into what I call instruction format planning. And I made a video on this. If you want to go check it out, I get more specific about what it is, what it does. But in general terms, it's basically like a recipe book, right, for yourself. So what you do with a recipe book is that, maybe you're a very good chef, very good cook, but let's say some time passes, right? Like maybe a year or two, and you forget how to make this particular cake, right? So what do? You go to your recipe book and you follow the instructions, right? So instruction format making is basically being able to um, write down what you are doing as you are doing it. So you're two different people, right? Simultaneously, you're working on a document which documents or registers or logs step by step what you are doing in a certain procedure or in a certain process. Why? So you can come back to it in the future when you need to repeat it or when you need to do it over again, right? Um, Now, like my formats, I have two different formats for English classes and for other classes like Spanish subjects, not Spanish language, but other subjects that have to do with education or psychology. And I have like basically a long list of different things. I also put in there like suggestions for activities, things like that. And I'm basically perfecting it. I'm quote unquote done with it, right? And I've printed out like two sets of them on, well, on two different occasions. I've printed out these formats to work on them, but honestly, I just keep on adding more and more stuff to it, more ideas, more activities, more steps, more considerations to the steps. Um, and I'm getting to the point where I'm saying, well, I need to basically have a finished, I need to have these two finished documents so then I can start using them because classes are about to start. So I need to start preparing the classes. I need to start, considering and getting ideas from these formats for my classes because the problem here is that when you're in a situation where you need while you're doing a process or a procedure or any activity, it's hard for us to come up, to remember everything. So this helps our memory ultimately. It's hard for us to remember all of the ideas, all of the activities. And what's great about it is that you go on your day to day, right? You're in your day to day life, and you're writing down these ideas as you get them, right? You get one idea randomly on a Monday at 8 in the morning, write it down, right? You get another one Saturday at 11 p.m., write it down, right? Now you have two ideas, and you keep doing this for weeks until like all of those ideas you're able to pass them on to a document, right? And then you have that document to use whenever you need, right? So whenever you need to, you can just go to the document, check out what the ideas were, right? And use them, apply them, right? Oh yeah, I remember that now. I can use it here or I can't, or I can try this other thing or whatever, right? Like a recipe book, like I mentioned. So the very interesting thing here is this idea that is basically in any type of plan or in any type of structure, you always have like, let's define the objectives, let's define how we're going to get there, right? The what and the how, let's define the resources, what help or aid do we have, right? So let's define the plan, let's define what we're going to do, right? Let's do it, right? Let's put it to the test, let's experiment. And then there's this other very important part, which is evaluation, right? Let's follow up on it. Let's see what worked, what didn't, which I think more often than not gets skipped. People just worry about doing what they need to do, and that's it, right? Or in other terms, doing the bare minimum, right? Like I already did it. Yeah, but now let's reflect on it. What worked? What didn't work? What can you change? And I understand we're lazy, so we can just, we basically say a lot of the times, like, I don't care about doing that. Next time I'll just look at the format again and repeat the process. And that's very deficient, because first of all, you're limiting the possibility to add more information or take away information that is not even working, right? So you're limiting the opportunity, you're limiting yourself to making adjustments, right, to adding more stuff. And the other thing is that you always have to have this mindset of evaluating what you do, right? It's very hard. It's a culture thing, right? I think you need to get into the habit of doing it. And I don't mean as a culture for everybody, I mean for you. You need to get into the habit of doing it. You need to make it your culture to evaluate what you do, to systemize it, right? Automize it. What I mean by systemizing things and automizing things is that you start doing them and you practice them and you do them so often that you no longer have to think about doing them. You just do them naturally, like driving a car, like breathing, like walking, right? But these are mental abstract processes we're talking about, which I think are needed in order to develop and maybe even come to be successful or get to be successful at one point in your life. So what I'm talking about here is this idea where I have various synonyms that I'm going to use: recursive, iterative, iterative, I think, repeated, on an improvement feedback loop, flexible and dynamic, cyclical, on a spiral, right? Progressive refinement, reflective process, permanent review and adjustment, and evaluative, right? Ultimately, what you need to do is go back to the steps, go back to what you're doing. Let's take the example of the instruction format. If you have an instruction format and you're following it, let's say during the process, during the school year in my case, or during the semester, and then I see something doesn't work, or I need to change or add something, I need to be able to do that, right? And I need to be able to make the change and maybe even reprint the sheets, right, with the new adjustments. Now, when I do that, how often I do that, that's going to be another part of the process, right? But this is like the process of the process of the process, right? So it gets, that's why I say I'm at the edge with this. This is the limit where I'm at currently. I will go beyond this, but this is where I'm currently at in my development, which I think is very neat. It's very nice to have this mindset, I think, because it gives order to your life. It makes things more comfortable when you need to plan, and you can actually focus now on quality, right? You're no longer worried about, oh, what step, or did I miss something, or because like I said, we're humans, our memory is imperfect, so we're going to need some type of reference, right? As I mentioned in my instruction format making video. But in this case, you're able to focus on quality, right? On good examples, on good ideas, on even developing the technique further, right? Or this strategy. So basically, the idea here at the end is find a way to make it dynamic, find a way to go back to things, right? I think about the norm ISIS 9001, where you have these 10 chapters, 10 steps, whatever you need to follow, but you're able to go back to them and make adjustments when necessary, right? So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not having a dogmatic document, not having a rigid limiting document where it's just like I need to follow this step by step. Like I think about Hermione Granger in the Harry Potter #6 movie, The Half Blood Prince, excuse me, where Hermione is doing this potion class with Harry, and she's following the instructions in the book step by step, and she's not getting them right. And Harry has this instruction manual, the same book, the same textbook for class, but his textbook has like notes and changes and adjustments, and add 3 nutcrackers, no, add 2.5, split the whatever, no, crush it instead, so you extract the juice out of it or things like that, right? And then Harry's potions come out to be perfect, which further helps develop the relationship with the teacher, right? Which helps him ultimately. So it's kind of fabricated, but the idea is that sometimes when you follow the things step by step, they might fail or they're no longer in use. They become obsolete with time. Time's our biggest ally, but also our biggest enemy. So in this case, you need to make adjustments, and just like Harry, make notes. He didn't make the notes were already made for him, but follow the notes, make your own notes, adjustments, and with that idea, then you can improve and make better potions, get better results, right? Which are the objectives of a process, right? Sometimes you enjoy the process too, but ultimately you need to get to those results, right? You need to be successful. You need to finish the tasks. You need to do the activities, right? You need to turn in the work, etc. All of these things. So yeah, find a way to go back, find a way to make adjustments, constant adjustments. It's uh, it's a document that is being perfected, but it will never be perfect. That means it will never be finished. It will never be done, right? Until you die or until humanity ceases to exist, because things change, right? So as things change, you need to adapt, evolve, change with it, right? So those are the main ideas I wanted to discuss here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Okay, peace.